Hey APUSH students, let's cover everything you need for Period 5. Before we start, print out the free speed review sheet that goes along with this video. The link is in the description below. Go ahead and look at Period 5. Circle any people, events, or vocab that you don't quite remember so you know what you need to study. Then once you're confident you've mastered a topic, you can check it off and move on to the next one. All right, here we go. Period 5 starts with manifest destiny. Coined by journalist John O'Sullivan was the idea that it was America's God-given duty to expand across the rest of the continent. This was promoted by James K. Polk, the manifest destiny president. In his 1844 election, he campaigned on the slogan 54-40 or fight, declaring that America would gain the Oregon Territory from Britain. The discovery of gold in California in 1848 also fueled this idea. Many Americans were willing to risk the hardships found along the westward trails like the Oregon, Santa Fe, and Mormon in hopes of a brighter future and economic opportunities out west. Following Texas independence, debates increased over annexation. Texas wanted to be admitted into the Union, but Congress worried that it would upset the balance between slave and free states that had been established since the Missouri Compromise. But ultimately, Texas was annexed in 1845 by President Polk. Shortly after, there was a border dispute between America and Mexico at the Rio Grande River. Fighting broke out, leading to the Mexican-American War. During the war, Pennsylvania Representative David Wilmot proposed that the institution of slavery be banned from any land gained as a result of the war. Even though this proposal failed, it demonstrated sectional tensions of the time, and it increased Southern fears that the government was trying to abolish slavery. The war officially ended in 1848 with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which significantly extended American land. America's borders were extended west to the Pacific Ocean and south to the Rio Grande River, although the southern border wasn't finalized until the Gadsden Purchase. Following the Mexican cession, tensions increased over the status of the new land. Would slavery be permitted? Many Americans, like the Free Soil Party, wanted to prevent slavery from expanding into the new territories, but the Southerners were willing to protect it at all costs. This led Henry Clay to negotiate the Compromise of 1850. While it added California as a free state, it allowed for popular sovereignty in Utah and New Mexico. And even though the Compromise banned the slave trade in Washington, D.C., it strengthened the fugitive slave law. This angered Northerners because they felt it made them complicit in the institution of slavery. Tensions reached a boiling point in 1854 with the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Because it allowed for popular sovereignty in the two territories, it nullified the 3630 line established under the Missouri Compromise. Both pro- and anti-slavery factions flooded into the territory hoping to influence the vote, leading to Bleeding Kansas. This led to the formation of the Republican Party, who were able to unify Americans who opposed the expansion of slavery into the Western territories. As tensions over slavery increased, abolitionists began taking action. Harriet Tubman helped an estimated 300 slaves escape to the North on the Underground Railroad. And Harriet Beecher Stowe published her novel Uncle Tom's Cabin, which showed the cruelty and inhumanity of enslavement. But many Southerners continued to defend the institution of slavery, like George Fitzhugh. He argued that the working condition and treatment of Northern industrial laborers was worse than slavery. In the 1857 Dred Scott case, the Supreme Court declared that African Americans were not citizens and therefore could not sue in a U.S. court. This decision effectively declared the Missouri Compromise unconstitutional, which was a major setback for the abolitionist cause. And some abolitionists, like John Brown, used more extreme tactics. Brown led the raid on Harper's Ferry, Virginia, in an attempt to arm a slave rebellion. While some viewed Brown as a martyr after this, it increased Southern fear that the North might resort to violence to end the institution of slavery. And while the North had a diverse economy based on manufacturing and trade, the Southern economy almost exclusively relied on plantation agriculture. This made Southerners unwilling to compromise on the institution of slavery, and they frequently used the states' rights argument. These economic differences also led to debates over tariffs because they helped Northern manufacturing but hurt Southern cotton sales. But all these tensions reached their breaking point with the 1860 presidential election. 4 candidates ran for president, including a split Democratic ticket. This enabled Lincoln to win despite not receiving a single Southern vote. South Carolina seceded shortly after, followed by 6 more Southern states. They formed the Confederate States of America and elected Mississippi's Jefferson Davis as president of the Confederacy. Going into the war, the North had significant advantages. They had a larger population, control of the U.S. Navy, and the banks, which meant access to money. They also had more infrastructure like railroads and more farmland for growing food. However, the South managed to sustain the war effort for years because of their determination to keep slavery. They also had better military leadership with experienced generals such as Robert E. Lee. There are a few key events you want to know from the Civil War. First is Fort Sumter, the official start to the war. Next is Antietam, The Confederate loss here discouraged foreign aid. The Battle of Gettysburg was considered the turning point of the war and officially ended Southern attempts to invade the North. The Atlanta campaign is also significant because General Sherman used total war to destroy the Southern morale and supplies, weaving a path of destruction from Atlanta to Savannah. And finally, Appomattox, where the Confederacy was forced to surrender. Lincoln's leadership was instrumental in the victory. He was determined to restore the Union. After Fort Sumter, Lincoln approved the draft of 75,000 troops. And as the war continued, the Conscription Act was passed in 1863 to draft additional troops. Lincoln also continued the pattern of previous presidents by restricting civil liberties during the war with his suspension of habeas corpus. Anyone rebelling or interfering with the war effort could be arrested and denied legal rights. This was especially controversial in the border states like Maryland. Following the Union victory at Antietam, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing the enslaved from states in open rebellion. Although it didn't end all slavery in America, it officially made the war about slavery. It also allowed African Americans to join the Union Army.
77 years ago.
Lincoln's infamous Gettysburg Address also helped redefine the purpose of the war by promoting the principles of equality and freedom. The speech also inspired soldiers and civilians to continue supporting the war effort. And although Lincoln had a plan to rebuild the Union following the conclusion of the war, he was unable to implement them because of his assassination by John Wilkes Booth. So once the war was officially over, the government had the difficult task of putting the country back together. Lincoln's initial plan was to restore the Union quickly by only requiring 10% of the state's voters to pledge an oath of allegiance to the Union. Johnson's plan required the Southern states to revoke secession and abolish slavery, but it also pardoned many Confederate leaders. The radical Republicans, however, wanted to grant full citizenship and voting rights to the freedmen and punish the former Confederate leaders. They used military force in Southern states to implement their Reconstruction policies. There were many successes during the Reconstruction era. The formation of the Freedmen's Bureau helped transition lives for the newly freedmen by providing basic necessities like food, clothing, and medical care. It also built schools. The Reconstruction amendments were ratified as well. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The 14th defined citizenship, and the 15th granted universal male suffrage regardless of race. This led to the election of many African Americans to public office, such as Hiram Ruggles. Despite these successes, there were many failures during the Reconstruction era as well. Many white Southerners resisted Reconstruction measures by instituting restrictive Jim Crow laws that legalized segregation. They also used poll taxes and literacy tests to keep freed men from voting. There was also an increase in racial violence by the formation of white supremacy groups like the Ku Klux Klan. Ultimately, Reconstruction was ended with the Compromise of 1877. With the split election, the House selected Rutherford B. Hayes in exchange for removing federal troops from the South. So what will this look like on exam day? For causation, you could see effects of Manifest Destiny, causes for the rise in anti-slavery sentiments, and causes of the Civil War. You could also see comparison questions with the Union and Confederacy, including their regional differences and their war strengths and strategies. So remember, while the Union had a larger population and industry, the South had a strong commitment to the Confederate cause. And for changing continuity, you're most likely to be asked how Reconstruction changed or failed to change American society. So while there were successes like the Freedmen's Bureau, ultimately, it failed to provide long-term protection for African American rights. Check out the APUSH Ultimate Review Packet for more help. We've got timelines, study guides, and essay practice. Follow the link in the description below to get a free preview. And if you think this video was helpful, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.